or be learned. Thank you for joining me on this week's guest series. I'm your host, Shiva Danishekar, and let's talk. Okay, so I'm here with 3 members of AAO, Autism Awareness Organization. Erin, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Erin Neely. I'm a senior about to graduate from Emory College, 19 Ox 21C. I use she, her, hers, and I'm an autistic self-advocate and a member of Emory AAO.
Holly?
Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Shan. I'm also a senior about to graduate from the college. I started the Autism Awareness Organization my freshman year, and Erin was one of my founding members along with me. I started this club in honor of my cousin who has very severe nonverbal autism, and this was inspired by the club I started in high school. That was the Richard Montgomery, which was my high school Autism Awareness Organization. So it's been 8 years running an organization.
And Paige?
Hi, my name is Paige Hewitt. I'm a junior in the college. I'm a neuroscience and behavioral biology major. I joined AAO's exec board when I was a sophomore, so last year, and I'm education chair, and I've really enjoyed what we've done so far. I was diagnosed with autism when I was 3, and now I'm just passionate about educating others about it, about research, and just about advocacy. So I really just enjoy the work we do in this organization.
Mm-hmm. So what does this organization do on, day-to-day basis, events, things like that?
So basically, our goal is to really celebrate autism at Emory, and we do that through 5 pillars. One is research. We have a research blog that you can find on our website where our research curators review and kind of tell us about a new paper that's been published about autism through Oxford, Georgia. We work with some of the local elementary schools where we have special ed classes. We have physical education. We had to stop this because of COVID, but we have therapeutic horseback riding programs as well as a sports league, which is really exciting. We have advocacy. So our advocacy team thinks about all the laws and policies regarding autism. And we have an advisor on Autism Speaks board that really helps us with the advocacy. And the final one is the education aspect. So what Paige and Erin really help us do, which is teaching people what autism is. Because if you can see on our website, we have a little video going around asking people what is autism. So a lot of people don't know. And I can give it off to Erin. She gave me the best explanation of autism there is. So Erin, do you want to kind of chime in on that?
Well, first, I'd like to chime in on the awareness thing as part of what we do. Our name is the Emory Autism Awareness Organization, although awareness is such a loaded term because probably almost everyone in America is aware of the existence of autism by now, unless you've been living under a rock. But a lot of people are wrongly aware. They have incorrect information. And, oftentimes it overplays challenges. Oftentimes it underplays challenges. People often get a single story, either the Sherlock Holmes or / Good Doctor type or the Rain Man type. And it's important to understand that when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So none of us can speak for our entire neurology, but there are some commonalities. I created a PowerPoint presentation a couple years ago about signs and characteristics, what professionals would call symptoms. And those that affect me include friendship troubles, hypersensitivity issues, difficulty with social rules and interactions. It's easy for me to interrupt people by accident, for example, particularly on Zoom calls, and a hard time with body language as well. Many autistics also have difficulties with nonverbal communication or idiomatic communication and sarcasm, although I use sarcasm and idioms.
So I was wondering, right? So each person can have varying experience with autism. Since it's so varying, what is considered a person that has autism? What are the baselines?
Well, I believe the standard diagnostic criteria, and Holly may be able to speak more to this because she's more on the professional side, but I believe the standard diagnostic criteria are social interests and restricted repetitive behaviors. And you have to check so many boxes on the list for a diagnosis.
The official scientific criteria for autism, you can find that in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual version 5. We can compare it to something more common that a lot of people know, for example, depression. So there are 15 or more characteristics of depression. And if you display 5 or more of those characteristics for over 2 weeks, you are diagnosed with depression. So the same thing for autism, but autism is a chronic disorder. So that means you are born with it. You can't really grow out of autism. So there are, as Erin said, many characteristics of autism, and only a clinician can diagnose it. So they can say, oh, you have, a child has echolalia, saying, do you want to go to the park? And the child repeating back, do you want to go to a park? So really, that's an example of saying, hey, you check off this box, therefore it's you have this characteristic of autism, and if you have enough characteristics, there's a benchmark there, you are diagnosed with it.
Mm-hmm. So I was wondering, is it controversial to say that it's even considered a disorder as it's seen in the DSM-5? Is that a controversy? Do people find that offensive? Paige, do you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, so from what I've read, usually we don't really like to term it as necessarily like a disorder, something that defines you, just because there's way more to a person who has autism than just autism. Like, it is a part of who they are, but there's also so much more to each person. And each person experiences it quite differently. So it's a spectrum. So some people with autism it may not even impact them as much as it might with somebody else. So I personally try to avoid calling it a disorder, just because there's way more to a person who has autism than just being autistic.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess this also gives us a segue into the controversies behind starting AAO. I think I've heard a couple things, but if someone wants to chime in on this topic, I heard that there was some difficulty getting started, particularly in, the semantics of what you guys are all about, right?
Yeah, so I started Autism Awareness Organization under a different title, sponsored by Autism Speaks. So Autism Speaks has a bunch of collegiate chapters called Autism U. So really big schools like Vanderbilt or University of Mississippi, University of Michigan, they all have a chapter of Autism U. And I was like, wow, this is a great network that we can be a part of. And I personally have volunteered with Autism Speaks for 8 years. And so through that, that's what it was chartered as. We got it fully kind of pushed through SGA and all the chartering processes without any issues. But the kind of problems we ran into was when we had our first really big Autism Awareness Month event, where we had a bake sale and we had the Light Up the Quad Blue, which is a national event for Autism Speaks, and the White House, the Great Wall of China, the Taj Mahal, they all participate in this huge event. So we did that, and we got a lot of pushback from, at least on the Oxford campus, because we were only chartered there, about Autism Speaks, how they don't support people with autism, how they believe vaccines cause autism, how a lot of these things. That I eventually wrote an article about it. And I also, by the end of that, I was like, hey, if we're going to run into so many of these issues, it made me want to quit, really. So that's when I was like, okay, we're going to charter something new. We're going to charter as the Emory Autism Awareness Organization.
And what was the process behind starting that? Was it difficult?
For changing it, no, it was not difficult. It was hard to kind of tell the people who were kind of supporting us and helping us charter Autism U to be like, hey, sorry, we're not going to be associated with you guys anymore. We're going to support you, but we're not going to be directly under you guys, if that means working for you guys, fundraising for you guys, if that makes sense. So through Emory, it was very easy, but through Autism Speaks personally, I thought it was a little bit disappointing. But also, I think it was better because I was able to do more of the things that we wanted to do, and because Autism Speaks U was a lot of fundraising, which I personally think the awareness aspect is much more important.
So what is the further steps with this? When did you start? A couple years ago, maybe? 2018, 2019, 2017. So have you seen a lot of growth in the last, 3-4 years of starting this?
Oh yeah, we have had a lot of projects, a lot of people that I've never thought I'd meet. On our email list, we have over 100 students. On our exec board, I think right now we have 30 something members on our exec board, and it's been really incredible to like see the growth and see all the connections we made with different organizations. Right now we have Autism Awareness Month, where we're sponsored by the Emory Autism Center, the Emory Med School, the Division of Accessibility and Services. So it's really exciting.
Wow, that's crazy. I guess I want to also ask for Erin or Paige, what do you guys see going forward with this organization as you graduate? I know Paige is a junior. Erin, you're a senior, right?
Right. Although I may be coming back to Emory for an unofficial 5th year as part of a lab group before I go on to graduate school. So maybe I'm not done here just yet. But regardless,
Mm-hmm.
I hope this organization continues to grow. I hope it continues to be guided by a variety of perspectives, both, students who may have family members with autism who work with parents and professionals, as well as self-advocates. We have to be an autism alliance here. We can't afford to burn bridges if we want to help everyone on the spectrum.
And in what ways do you guys help with people in different parts of the spectrum?
Well, in terms of helping autistic students at Emory itself, we've collaborated with the Emory Inclusion and Accessibility Office to host Autism Awareness Month in April. Allison Butler has been helping us so much as the coordinator of that office. We're having keynote speakers to educate people. I have done education sessions myself before. I'm sure Paige has also participated. We did posters together. And in the future, when we come back to in person, I'd like to remember the Disability Day of mourning every year, just like we did last year pre-pandemic.
So I guess I'll ask Paige, what are the steps going forward? What are some new things you're going to try? How are you going to keep pushing this organization to, reach more ears, to raise more awareness?
Yeah, so I definitely, going forward, would want to see a lot of things that we're already doing continue, like autism awareness events and making posters and doing the day of mourning, and also just really try, and also doing the research reviews and having research curators, just because I think it's really important to stay updated about like the current literature and research that's out there about autism. But in addition, just continuing on with education, just because I think that educating the public about autism and about like what it is, or any like misrepresentations that are presented in the media, is super important, because you can't help people with autism if you don't know exactly what it is or what it exactly looks like. I guess in the future, we already do a lot of collaborations, but I guess like continuing to collaborate with as many people as possible just to raise the awareness, and then people from those organizations can hear more about it. So definitely, I really like the way it's going right now, but definitely trying to increase collaboration, I think, would be something that wouldn't hurt and would be
Mm-hmm.
good for the club.
Do you guys have any exciting ideas that you want to try that you haven't done yet, or anything new? I know you guys do like keynote speakers and stuff like that.
Well, towards the end of this month, Monday the 26th, we have a panel of autistic student experiences where Paige and I and one other student will be there to talk about our own personal perspectives. So I would highly encourage people to come to that. We also have a research symposium on Friday at, I believe, 3 Eastern time, where AAO members who have done research on autism and neurodiversity will present their work.
I gotta ask, maybe like a SparkNote version, but what are your experiences?
Well, part of my experience has been, learning to navigate the social environment of college. I made a lot of missteps my freshman year, and I made some people angry, and I also hadn't learned how to deal with failure yet. So I kind of ran into a bad situation in the spring of my freshman year where I needed help because I felt like I was failing at everything academically and socially. So I took the summer off to kind of recover, and then came back and worked on improving my skills academically and socially. And I participated in a lot of things up until the coronavirus pandemic, which was another rough spot for me because it was a big change. It was a big, mostly negative change. And autistic people tend not to like change, from remote learning, from losing club activities, not to mention worrying about the pandemic itself, people getting sick, people dying, etc. But, I've tried to adjust to that as best as I can. And it's probably been a little harder on me as an autistic person because I have trouble kind of organizing and navigating social events. So I feel a little more cut off from peers than maybe some people would be. But, I'm working on it. I've joined some other virtual organizations that are working to make the world a better place, and I'm applying to bridge programs to graduate school.
That's really interesting because, everybody knows the transition from high school to college is already as difficult as it can be. You're getting in a new environment, you have social environment, academic environment, everything's different. And you said you had a very difficult time transitioning into your first year or semester of college. Is it kind of like a sensory overload thing, or is that because there was just so much change happening?
I feel like it was more the challenges of the college environment that I wasn't used to, where unlike in high school where I was, unquestionably one of the best students in the school. The students that Emory and Oxford admit were all the best in their class in high school. So there's a lot more competition. You're the same size fish in a bigger pond. And I hadn't really learned how to deal with that yet. And especially with social challenges, making it harder to deal with, both navigating organizations and becoming involved and dealing with emotional challenges.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. That's something they don't really prep you for, right? You get thrown into college, especially if you're an exceptional student in high school. You get thrown into a good college and your exceptionality is now baseline and you have to work even harder to become exceptional at a great school. And I'm sure that stress and change is hard for anybody. So, hats off to you for figuring it out, making it work, and, taking some time off in the summer to just unwind and figure yourself out. Paige, do you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, so a lot of the challenges I experienced are very similar to what Erin experienced. For me personally, I'm not a huge fan of change either. So the transition from high school to college was somewhat difficult because although it was exciting, being away from my family and from my friends at home that I was used to, been friends with for years, to suddenly not knowing anybody at Emory, at least for me personally, I didn't know anyone from my high school or like really many from my like hometown at Emory. So it was a little difficult in making new friends at first. And also, like Erin was talking about, just from being like one of the most exceptional in high school to being surrounded by like everyone being exceptional, and just knowing that the amount of work I have to put in to be successful in college is a lot more than the work I needed to put in like in high school. That was a little bit difficult to adjust to as well. So my main challenges were just like with the change, but after like a year or so I got used to it. With remote learning, that kind of presented another problem with like another change. But one thing that was okay was just because like since I went home for a while, I was used to the environment. So although it was a change in environment, it wasn't like a brand new environment. But yeah, I would definitely say that transition from high school to college was definitely not an easy one. But I know that that's a time that's not easy for a lot of people as well.
Also, forgive me if I say anything incorrectly. I just want to understand better. You both mentioned change is a difficult one, right? Change is something that even people with autism struggle with. I'm just trying to understand, because change is hard for everybody. some more than others, but change can be difficult, especially entering college is difficult for a lot of people. I'm trying to understand what made it so difficult for you both. Is it like, what was your thought process? Was it like, this is too much changing at one moment? What were your thought process?
Somewhat of a lack of security and confidence, I would say, not always knowing what to do in a new environment. And also for me, being upset about all the clubs and all the interactions we lost when we had to go home because of the pandemic. I mean, I'm aware that that sucked for everybody, autistic or not, but because I'm autistic, I often rely on more structured social opportunities to meet and interact with people. So it may have been harder on me and on autistic students in general to have to switch to remote learning for that reason.
So I just wanted to ask, when you see change from structure, what are your steps to get back into a structure that you can create? Like, let's say as soon as the pandemic happened, you had to go home, you had to readjust yourselves, both of you, to a whole new structure. And you said change is somewhat difficult. So, what is that process you go through to be like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to start doing now?
I usually just try to make a new routine because personally for me, and probably for a lot of other people who have autism, I really like routine and sticking to it. So when that changes, it gets kind of hard. But like one way to combat that is to make a new routine. It takes like a little getting used to, but once I have that structure back in my life, and like Erin said, like I function much better with structure. So just trying to at least get some sort of structure back is like what I try to do at first.
I guess that actually segues into, we talked about some difficulties with autism. I was wondering, what are some benefits? I know Erin's already told me a little bit, but I'd like for you guys to jump in on this. I think structure is a great benefit. Being organized, right, in a way where you have a routine. That's awesome. So is there like, what other benefits do you see that this helps you with people that have autism? And I know it's different for each person, but like for you guys specifically.
I would say part of it would be a systematic, more mathematically oriented mind. For example, I'm a physicist, which has rules, and once you know them, you can solve any physical problem. It's just learning the rules and how they apply that's the hard part. So I still don't blame people who struggle in physics. I've struggled in physics myself. And in the humanities side of things, I've done philosophy and logic because I can understand how arguments work, how they're put together, and also I do care about the world around me. It's only a half truth that autistic people lack empathy, because there are really two kinds of empathy: cognitive and affective, or knowing and caring, respectively, what other people are going through. And cognitive is a problem for a lot of people with autism, but effective empathy, caring about other people, can be a strength. I've been told that I had a good sense of justice and fairness since I was really little.
Wow, that's awesome. Paige, do you have anything else, or do you see similar characteristics in yourself?
Yeah, I see some like similarities like to Erin. I guess like another thing, I mean, I don't know if this is directly related to autism or not, but I personally like my long-term memory is really strong. So that made things a lot easier, especially like in classes that require more like memorization. And so just like the memory has helped me. And just sometimes I take things very literally, or I see things very black and white, which sometimes can be a disadvantage. But at other times, when you don't want to overcomplicate something and just want to see something for how it is, like that's when it kind of presents an advantage. And also just some similar things to Erin, like having easier time with like more logical and analytical problems.
Yeah, so Erin was telling me, a lot of people oftentimes with autism end up in the STEM field because of, their mathematical and like analytical side. This kind of brings me into, the concept of the spectrum. I was hoping you guys could explain that a little bit. I don't entirely understand how the spectrum works. I know Holly mentioned things in the DSM-5 that there's a load of possibilities, and is that how the spectrum works? Is like from minor to, major implications on your life?
Well, I'll chime in that the spectrum essentially means that some autistic people have more and different challenges and traits and characteristics than others. We all have, different strengths. We all have different support needs. And the terms high functioning and low functioning are generalizations that can be useful, but they're often also overgeneralizations because some people may have a lot of support needs in some areas, but do really well in other areas.
Yeah, I agree. I think the implications of having the autism brain, I read a whole, I think Temple Grandin wrote a really great book about the autism brain. We barely know anything about it, and all the significant research have all been kind of refuted and rebutted. So we don't know anything about it, but we know that, as you said, there are a lot of people with autism in the STEM field, and how Paige and Erin have abilities to really see the logic that I could personally never see. And then we can see that a lot of people with autism are at the top of their fields, like Temple Grandin in agriculture, people like it's alleged that Steve Jobs had autism, and that really says something about the value of really seeing autism as a characteristic and not a disability, because there are ways to, use the characteristics of autism to really get something, or just use that characteristic as something like someone is very good at English, someone with autism because of that characteristic is really good at math. And I think that people really need to really pay attention to that.
I guess I just wanted to go off of what Holly was mentioning. Steve Jobs, it was believed that he had autism and stuff. And I just think she has a point with this. You're dealt a hand of cards and you have to, figure out your life with the hand you're dealt. So it was interesting that, Steve Jobs became such a prominent figure in our society by creating Apple, and how I believe he was a perfectionist too. And I'm just wondering, is that a component of some people may experience when they have autism?
Absolutely it is. It was something that, I've experienced in my life, and I believe that contributed to my being thrown for a loop by same-size fish in a bigger pond syndrome. And it was in a workbook I had as a kid about autism traits, and perfectionism was one of the workbook pages. That one did apply to me, even though not every page in that book applied to me.
Paige?
Yeah, I definitely experienced perfectionism, and that was something that made it kind of difficult transitioning to college because my standards of like what doing well on an assignment is like would have always been very high. Even if it was just like overall like a good score, I would always hyperfixate on what I got wrong just because I was like, why did I get that wrong? In some ways, like it helps motivate me to do better, but in other ways, sometimes it can be detrimental by like kind of increasing like anxiety and fixating on like what I got wrong instead of what I got right. So that's something I'm trying to work on.
That's so interesting because these difficulties you might see can also, once you like hone in how to deal with your everyday life with these things, can be seen as such huge benefits. Perfectionism, it doesn't have to be considerably a bad thing. You could be really good if you're in like the production industry. You could be really good at what you do because you see these little details that most people don't see. And I think Holly even mentioned that, Erin brings up points and ideas that she hasn't even thought about, which gives you such different edge of thinking and whatnot, which is so cool. I also wanted to, I guess, talk about what Holly mentioned to me about, your difficulties in AAO and like the vandalism that recently happened, right?
Yeah, so basically what happened is that we put up an exhibit for Autism Awareness to launch Autism Awareness Month, and it was supposed to be up for the weekend. And so we put it up. We had a big celebration on the quad. There was a few people there that helped us. And then when I went to go clean it up, we saw that our posters were ripped up and there were other posters kind of condemning Autism Speaks, which our event was not associated with them at all. So I guess they assumed that we were doing an event for them, as well as quotes such as it should be illegal for people with disabilities to be paid under minimum wage, which we don't not agree with. We fully agree with that. And then so our response is we created a social media post saying that we want to work with you, not against you, and we're not associated with Autism Speaks, but we do support them, and those are the reasons why. And Erin has kind of the best kind of response to that, if you want to kind of talk about that, Erin.
It's sad in general that in the modern college environment, civil dialogue and learning from each other have been replaced by knee-jerk reactions and vandalism, particularly in the area of autism. Yes, it's true that Autism Speaks is far from a perfect organization, but they have been taking some steps to improve themselves and listen more to the voices of autistic people, which, I'm an autistic person, so I obviously believe that our voices are important, but we also cannot afford to burn bridges with parents and professionals, because different people with autism do have different challenges, and they may have different experiences from the autistic advocates who are on social media. They may have different support needs that parents and professionals can help with.
You're talking about all this vandalism and all that. What was the heat behind Autism Speaks exactly to disassociate yourselves? Why is there so much heat behind their organization?
Well, it has a history of uplifting some voices of neurotypical relatives and professionals at the expense of autistic voices. In the past, at Autism Speaks, the voices of autistic people themselves were routinely ignored. Degrading and insulting advertisements were made about us. In 2009, a board member created a video talking about how tempted she was to commit a murder-suicide of her autistic child and herself. And the only reason she didn't was she also had a typical child. So that is clearly extremely problematic. That board member apologized. The organization has disavowed that video, and we understand now that such comments are extremely inappropriate, but people can learn and grow, and we shouldn't cut off opportunities for them to do so.
Okay, so do you guys have any closing remarks or any last minute things you want to say, the maybe overall message or something?
I guess my main thing, or one thing that I want to do even after I graduate, is just to increase education. And I want to do this for the rest of my life and always advocate and just make sure that people with autism have a voice and be able to just always have a variety of perspectives. And I hope that AAO continues far into the future at Emory, and that they continue with research and updating the research and the literature and holding events that educate others, and also just collaborating with others and trying to get as many people involved as possible. And I've enjoyed my time in here so far, and I definitely want to stay involved for as long as I can.
I agree with Paige. This is a lifetime project because, as Holly said, autism doesn't go away, so neither will I from the field. I mean, I will, God willing, be in physics graduate school shortly, and then in a physics career, but in my life at the university and outside it, I intend to do whatever I can to make life better for all folks on the spectrum, no matter what needs and challenges and strengths they may have.
Wow, that's incredible. I wanted to ask lastly, if someone wants to learn more or get help or, see some of your talks, is it all on the website? Are you guys on YouTube? Where can they find you?
We have a website, Emory Autism Awareness, that you can easily find on Google. We also have an Emory Autism Awareness Instagram account where we share pictures that tell our story. If you would like to learn more about autism, I would recommend going to reputable sources for psychology in general, as well as the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network and other organizations that are run by autistic people that talk about their experiences and their perspective.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys for, being on this talk, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this, and just want to thank the listeners for, tuning in and checking them out. So, thanks.